All right, the next fight up is also on the prelims in the UFC's middleweight division in a phenomenal matchup between the number 15 ranked middleweight in Chris the Action Man Curtis, who comes into this fight with a record of 29 victories and 9 defeats, going up against Joaquin Buckley, who comes back with a record of 15 victories and 5 defeats. Buckley versus Curtis is a great matchup. It's great matchmaking by the UFC. They're both going to be coming forward looking for action. I mean, Chris the Action Man Curtis is coming off his first loss in the UFC to Jack Hermansson. And in that fight, Curtis just really couldn't get it going. The outside game of Hermansson, the footwork, the angles, the low kicks, the front kicks to the body, and then eventually hurting Curtis up, on the feet, pushing him up against the cage, landing some elbows in the clinch, knees to the body, and just really outworking Chris Curtis, not allowing him to close off that range and land his beautiful counters, the overhand left, the left sit back, the quick sit rear uppercut to the body, the right hook over the top, the straight left behind it, the straight left to roll underneath. He really wasn't able to land any of that on Hermansson due to his footwork, due to the kicking game. He really just was playing the outside game too much and could never close off that distance. You could see he was visibly frustrated, really frustrated actually during and after that fight, but that was his first loss in the UFC. Prior to that, Curtis had knockout victories over Brendan Allen and then Phil Hawes in his debut. The knockout over Phil Hawes and the win over Brendan Allen looks really good, and then he beat Rodolfo Vieira via decision prior to that loss to Hermansson. So he was on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC, all against Phil Hawes, Brendan Allen, and Rodolfo Vieira, and then he lost to Jack Hermansson. And then Joaquin Buckley was able to get a win in his last fight, I believe. Or actually, no. So he lost his last fight to Nasruddin Imavov. I thought Imavov was going to knock him out in that fight, but Buckley was able to survive. He looked really good in the third round, was able to pour the pressure on Nasruddin Imavov. Really had a good account of himself in that fight, but he lost the fight via decision. Prior to that, he was on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC with a TKO doctor stoppage over Albert Duraev, a split decision win over Abdul Razak El Hassan, and then a knockout in the third round over Antonio Arroyo. Prior to that, he got knocked out in the first round via head kick to Alessio Di Chirico. That loss doesn't look the greatest, but it is what it is. So currently he's sitting with a record of, let's see, he's got a record of 5-3 inside the UFC, coming off a loss in his last fight, but he's 3-1 in his last 4. Chris Curtis also currently 3-1 in his last 4 fights inside the promotion. This is going to be a good fight. Both guys fight out of southpaw. Both guys have, that forward pressure type of style. The only thing is the movement, the footwork, and the rushing in is going to come from the side of Numansa, Joaquin Buckley. Joaquin Buckley is going to be looking to explode in on Chris Curtis at any chance he gets. He's a very Mike Tyson-esque fighter. Chris Curtis has a boxing-heavy style of approach with his game as well, but Joaquin Buckley's more of that bob and weave, slip, roll, come back with the counters, roll underneath, 6-3-2, roll under, slip counter, 6-3-2, roll under to the right hook, roll to the left hook, roll underneath. He's always moving his head. He's always trying to close off the range. He does have some, tidbits of a traditional martial arts style in his game. He likes to use the front leg side kicks. I mean, the knockout he landed against Impa Kasanganay, where he was able to catch that rear left body kick, he swept it across, but as he swept it, Buckley jumped and spun and landed a spinning back kick right to the jaw of Kasanganay, knocked him out, got one of the biggest KOs in UFC history. But Buckley's going to be the more explosive guy in terms of his movements, but I think the better, cleaner striker and the guy who's going to have more effects with his power is going to be Chris Curtis, and I'll explain why. Curtis is going to be better on the counters. Buckley's going to be the guy who's, getting more real estate around the octagon. He's going to be moving in and out. He's going to be moving laterally. He's going to be changing his angles. He's going to be trying to dart in, roll underneath, slip, roll, come back with a counter. That's just the guy that Joaquin Buckley is. That's his fighting style. He fights on the outside, but he bum rushes in with his big shots. He's got power. He can do it very well. He's got good footwork and good movement. The only thing is Chris Curtis might have a little bit of trouble cutting off Buckley. And I think if anybody's picking Buckley, that's probably going to be the reason why. Because they feel like it's going to be hard for Curtis to cut off Buckley. When you watch his last fight against Jack Hermansson, he had a hard time with the kicking game, the constant movement, the angles, the shifting, getting that outside foot. He had trouble finding his range to land his boxing combinations. He had trouble pressuring Jack Hermansson, and I think we are going to see a little bit similar of a fight here with Joaquin Buckley. I think it's going to be a little bit harder for Curtis to close off the range on Buckley because of his movement. He's going to be constantly angling off, moving to his left, they're both going to be southpaws in this fight. So they're both not going to have that outside foot advantage, and it's going to be a little bit harder for each guy to land their attacks because they're so used to fighting guys in the opposite stance. They're so used to having to get that outside foot against the opponent. But both these guys are going to have the same shots: the right jab, the left cross, the left body kick, the left overhands, the lead uppercuts, the lead right hook. It's all going to be the same. And although I think at kicking range and at kicking distance, it's Buckley's fight to lose. Like, Buckley's going to win that fight 9 out of 10 times, 10 out of 10 times when the fight is at kicking range or just outside of kicking range. But if somebody can cut off the kicking range, close the distance, and find their way into range and be able to land those counters, it's going to be the action man, Chris Curtis. He's very patient in his approach. He might be losing the fight early on, but he'll find the openings. He'll find the counters. He uses that shoulder roll and high guard on the opposite side. Very boxing-esque approach to his defense. Some high guard, some shoulder roll, some slipping and rolling, and that's how he's able to catch the opponents coming in with the overhand lefts. The thing that Buckley has to worry about that Curtis doesn't is Curtis's shots are going to be short, and there's not going to be a lot of wind-up on them, which can have Buckley running into the counters of Chris Curtis. Even the one he caught Phil Hawes with, he just caught him stepping in and boom, caught him with a short overhand left. But it was literally, there was no space. It was almost like not even an arm punch. It was like a shoulder punch. He just turned it over, caught Phil Hawes on the chin, hurt him, and then jumped on him and finished him. The one against Brendan Allen, they both went for similar shots. Allen went to the body. Curtis went up top to the head. Boom, short hook. Caught him, rocked him, and hurt him. Curtis is really good with his boxing technique. It's not too much wind-up. There's not a lot of overextension. It's just him finding the range and being able to cut off Buckley that's going to be the problem. Is he going to be able to cut off Joaquin Buckley? Is he going to be able to close that range? Get past the front kicks, the spinning back kicks. Get past the darting in, straight left hands, right hooks, right uppercuts. Get past the stance switches. Get past that funky outside fighting style of footwork. If he can close off the range and close off the distance, he's going to catch Buckley and he's going to hurt him and probably finish him off. I think that Chris Curtis has not the bigger power like we talked about earlier. He's not the bigger power puncher pound for pound, but he's better at setting up his shots. His shots are shorter, which adds power to the shots, and he's just a cleaner striker overall. Precision beats power, timing beats speed. I think it's going to be kind of the similar situation with here. Shout out to Conor McGregor. It's going to be a similar situation in this fight. The precision of Chris Curtis with his counters is going to beat the power of Joaquin Buckley, and the timing of Chris Curtis being able to catch Buckley as he comes in with those darting combinations, as he throws those big shots, is going to be the difference. And I think he's going to catch Joaquin Buckley coming in on a counter, drop him, and actually finish him off. I could see the fight going the distance, but based off of how explosive both guys are, I expect it to probably more than likely get a finish from either side. I think if it's a one-shot knockout, it could be Buckley landing a high kick on Chris Curtis, because with that boxing shoulder roll and high guard on the opposite side, you can be open and susceptible to kicks up top to the head. If you shoulder roll and you're rolling the wrong way and you get caught with a high kick, the defenses just aren't really there. And even if you have that high guard on that side, you're going to be able to, feel the power of that kick coming through your guard. So I like the kicking game and the outside game of Buckley, but I like the countering game and the pressure game of Chris Curtis a little bit more when it comes to breaking down the fight. They're not going to have the outside foot advantage as they normally would going up against an orthodox fighter, but I'm going to say that Curtis works the body of Buckley in that second round. I think Buckley probably wins the first round, but Curtis starts to pick up on the timing and the distance towards the tail end of that first round, and then going into the second, that left uppercut to the body, that bolo style uppercut, the right hook over the top, the 1-1-2, they're all going to start landing. And eventually Buckley's going to come in and explode on a shot. He's going to get caught with that straight left of Chris Curtis, wobbled, dropped, and knocked out. So my pick is going to be Chris the Action Man Curtis, the number 15 ranked fighter in the middleweight division, to defeat Joaquin Buckley via a third round TKO. He's currently lined at plus 115. Earlier on in the week, he was plus 120, plus 125 as an underdog. I believe I just got him last night at a plus 125 underdog up against Buckley. Like, this isn't the best fight to bet on overall going up and down the card. I could definitely see areas where Buckley wins this fight, and I already talked about that. If he keeps it at range, keeps it at a distance, and fights at the range he wants to, then he's going to win the fight. If Curtis can close the range and then time Buckley, darting in and rushing in and exploding and catching him with his clean boxing counters, then Curtis is going to win the fight. It's going to be more of a push and pull style of approach from Curtis, but he's going to be more focused on the pull. Buckley is going to be push, 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 and not so much pull, and I think the push and pull style of Chris Curtis is going to find him that opening and allow him to win this fight via knockout in the third round. Like I said, I like on Chris Curtis as an underdog play here. I like the fight doesn't go to the distance, but I don't like it that much. If they line it at over 1.5, I think that's your best play for the fight. If it's over 2.5, I mean, it's kind of risky. But best play, in my opinion, is going to be Chris Curtis on the money line. Second best play would be over 1.5 rounds if they line it in that direction. I wouldn't be mad at you for playing Buckley, but I got to go the action man, Chris Curtis, via third round TKO over Joaquin Buckley, and he'll just inch his way ever so closely up that top 15 ranking. Probably be ranked number 14 or 13 by next week.